Five.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Delusions of Grandeur, where I, one of your hosts, leads you into a film that where we are dealing with a theme called August in the Asylum. But my good buddy Forrest here will tell you all about the movie that, or one of the movies that we will be talking about tonight. So take it away, Forrest.
Thank you, Dave. Tonight we're bringing back the pre-show for our discussion of A Nightmare on Elm Street of 1985's Nightmare on Elm Street, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, directed by Jack Sholder and written by David Chaskin, with characters created by Wes Craven. It's a follow-up to 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. And it's set 5 years after the first movie, with the Walsh family having moved into the home of the former home of of the first movie's protagonist, Nancy Thompson. Their teenage son Jesse has a nightmare about being stalked by Krueger, who is out to possess him in order to continue his reign of terror in the real world. And that was actually a mix of just to attribute sources. That was a mix of Wikipedia and IMDb's summaries on the movie, and so we'll go. I guess we'll go. I guess we'll go around with our first impressions. Start to my. I will start to my right. Dave, this is your first time seeing Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
No, it is definitely not my first time seeing it, but it's my first time seeing it in some time. I've marathoned it at least twice with Tammy before, and we kind of did like a trilogy of the first three these last couple of days, so that I could just prepare myself for seeing the other two. Just wanted to see the connections, if there were any connections or whatnot. This particular one, it's not the strongest one in the series, but it is likable in some aspects. I mean, there are some humoristic elements to it. I feel like Freddy Krueger, the character, builds as the films go, and this is just kind of like a building block for the character that he becomes, and the one that we know well and have learned well. Although the first one, it is definitely darker than the other ones. So to me, it was very cool seeing this again. I relatively enjoyed the character appearances in here, and I just enjoy the franchise as a whole. So.
Right, great. Thank you for that, Dave. Roger, is this your first time watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2?
In its entirety, yes. I was aware of the Nightmare of Elm Street. I've seen snippets in the trailers, but this is my first time actually watching the film. I was a bit apprehensive. I don't particularly, can stomach most of your horror films out there, but I was surprised I was able to get through it. Overall, I think it's a good film. Overall, I mean, I was entertained. It was too gory that I couldn't keep on watching the film, and I look forward to seeing the third one.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Roger. Jake, is this your first time watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2?
Yes and no. I thought it was. I thought going into this that I had only seen the first movie and Freddy v. Jason, which of course we watched for our Friday the 13th discussions. And of course, I had already commented on the first movie when we covered that one a while back. What I may or may not have pointed out then, and I had totally forgotten about, was that when I was going to prepare for our discussion on A Nightmare on Elm Street, I put in the second movie to watch it. I was going to try to watch several of the films to help with the discussion. Problem is, partly because Brandon gave me those 4 movie sets and I wanted to finish off the first one, Problem is, I was even more narcoleptic than usual that week, and
Oh, that's actually quite appropriate.
it is. It
Franchise.
is. And actually, no, I think I did. Now that I'm glad you reminded me. I remember now. I couldn't remember what I saw that was a real and what was a dream because I was half asleep when I watched it. So, but then I was sitting down this time watching it. I thought I was coming to it fresh, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I do know this part, and I know this part." And and all told, I still did not make it all the way to the end because I'm going to be honest, this movie bored me. That is part of the reason my
What?
narcolepsy is one, but that's part of the reason I fell asleep both times. This time I'd say I've seen more like 90% of the movie, maybe a little more than that. But if I'm to be perfectly honest, I still haven't seen the very end. I saw most of it, and I've seen the first part now twice. It just really, honestly, compared to the first and third movies and Freddy v. Jason, this one just did not grab me. It was just there. You know, it's kind of like my reaction to most of the Friday the 13th movies. So it wasn't a bad movie, but
Okay, thank you for that, Jake. Dustin, this is your first time watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
You fell asleep. The fuck? Give me a minute to compose myself after that. So I first saw this many years ago when I kind of grinded through Ground? Is that it? When I ground through a bunch of horror series kind of all at once. Before I was a horror fan, like I just watched everything in a couple of days working on a paper and didn't really pay much attention to anything. This is one of the weirder Elm Street entries, and there are a lot of weird ones. So it's not exactly clear why Freddy needs to do things the way he does in this movie. So it's a bit of a confusing watch at first, but after seeing it a couple times, it's like, well, you just accept it. So, I mean, I didn't necessarily like it at first, but I wasn't really bored per se by it. So I have an overall fairly positive outlook on this movie, and especially after seeing the Scream Queen documentary, I have a greater appreciation for it and for what Mark Patton did with the role and like went through around the time when this movie was made. Right, so yeah, I think I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I did previously after having seen that.
Yeah, that was actually a really good documentary. One of my favorites of the last that I've seen in the last year.
It's a great documentary.
Yes, it is. Yep. I actually did try to reach out to Mark Patton. I tried emailing Mark Patton, hoping we could bring him on for an interview or something, but he never got back to me.
Well, that was, I don't know. I met him at I think it was either the Milwaukee Film Fest or the Twisted Dreams Film Fest. I met him at some film fest here in Milwaukee, and he signed a bunch of stuff for me, and he was really cool to talk to, and we became friends on Facebook. And then he blocked me for sharing Bernie Sanders memes because he's one of those like Pete Buttigieg supporters who just really hates Bernie Sanders for no real reason. It was very disappointing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dane, is this your first time watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2?
No. Now it's funny. I did like this movie quite a bit because I remembered hearing about it, that it had a lot of like homoerotic undertones to it, and
it does.
And it's I thought that it was beyond even undertones. I think that there's been some debate about like how much of the lead actor, you know, how much of that about his personal life, how much they knew about, and how much they were trying to bring to the forefront and everything. But it was at a time when that sort of thing wouldn't have been discussed as openly as it would be today. But the fact that they touched on it in any kind of way, I thought was, and especially in a slasher film, I thought that was kind of, forward thinking in so many ways for the time. even if not all of it is necessarily aged all that well. But I was just like, well, it's better than the standard, teenage girl in distress and that kind of stuff. It
Right.
gives us a little bit more to chew on. Plus, what is the movie about? It's about, kind of transformation and about, coming to grips with something that's developing inside of you that's coming out. And in this case, it's Freddy needing to physically come into the real world again. And that to me was like, well, because Freddy can do anything in the world of dreams, but I think that's just an interesting idea that he has to have a physical host to come back into the real world. And so I think you have a lot of good metaphors in there, and I think it was pretty solid overall. But I appreciated that it wasn't the same old thing that you would see with a typical slasher film.
Right. Thank you for that, Dane. And Brandon, is this your first time watching Nightmare on Elm Street 2?
No, this is not my first time. As far as my first experience, I want to say it was when I decided just to do a straight run of all the films early on, when I originally got those 4 film sets. It wasn't like, say, 4, which I had seen 1.5 million times because that was the one that was always on TV. And it's probably my least favorite of the Freddy movies. I look at this probably the same way many people looked at Halloween Part 3. Even though I love Halloween Part 3, but many people look at this one a lot in the same vein, because I felt like it was different and in a way I really didn't care for. There were elements I liked, but overall, though Freddy was probably one of his most powerful in this one, because I don't think I've ever seen Freddy have that much influence over the real world.
Yeah, most of these people are not asleep.
Yeah.
So,
possession film.
As far as things go, there are little things I liked about it, but overall, I don't know. I just don't. It doesn't really grab me like the others do.
Okay. Thank you for that, Brent.
There is not as much. I agree with Brandon's take, I think, to a degree as well. Because, like, when Freddy does show up, Freddy is different this time. Like, he's not telling as many jokes. Like, he's just trying to get into Jesse.
Yep.
So
yeah. Well, to hear a lot of the jokiness kind of came more with the next few movies.
Oh yeah, 3 is what set that out. 3 set that standard.
This was kind of the last that we would see of like dark, scary Freddy until Wes Craven's New Nightmare. A few years later. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Brandon?
That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And for me, though, this is not my first time watching this movie. The first time I'd seen this movie, I rented it from Hollywood Video when I was 13. Actually, I rented it for my 13th birthday. And I remember like at the time I had just moved to Utah, and a lot of kids there are religious and don't really watch scary movies. So I had a hard time getting anybody to watch it with me. But I did eventually did sit down and watch it right before I had to return it. And I had already seen the first movie prior to this. At the time I thought, I liked it, but I didn't really pick up on but it didn't really cross my mind like how totally, like, I feel like a lot. I mean, I liked it when I first saw it, but and then when I went online, I was kind of surprised at how many fans hated this movie. But like over time, it didn't really dawn on me that it was until as I got older, it didn't really dawn on me like how totally different this movie was. Like not just totally, but also like overall different from the first movie, and even the later sequels, or like also the homoerotic undertones, which actually I think are probably the most interesting part of this whole movie. And I have to agree with the Halloween 3 comparison. I mean, if you're watching with the rest of the movies, it doesn't really seem to fit. I mean, all the other movies pick up from where the other ones left off. whereas this one kind of feels very standalone. You can take it or leave it. I feel that same way about this movie, Halloween 3, and Friday the 13th Part 5, and that I think they're better than their reputation suggests. But they definitely feel like they definitely are very much different from everything that came before and after it, and you could really take it or leave it.
But it is nice that it does work in its own context, and it's something that you can absorb, for what it is. And I mean, I can't think of any other slasher films, or especially from the period, I can't really think of any other ones that touch on these kinds of themes, even if they're, handled in a way that is more subtext for the time that nowadays it's so like, we're much more aware of that stuff now, to where it almost comes across like as overtones rather than undertones. Kind of like Top Gun, same kind of thing. By now, modern standards, it's so overt, but at the time, that would have been very subversive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and even Quentin Tarantino, Quentin Tarantino called that out back in the 90s. What should I? If there was anything else I was going to say about this, I tend to watch. I think it's pretty good. I mean, I like the idea of Freddy Krueger being this allegory for a young man's struggles with his homosexuality. And it was definitely ahead of the game in that regard. I guess we'll just we'll jump into the discussion of the movie itself, or the movie. So Jesse has this nightmare about being driven off a cliff being on a school bus and being driven off a cliff, and but the next day he goes to school with a girl named Lisa, whom he is supposed to be interested in romantically, but he's not very flirtatious with her. And he also about a good 3 decades before this became, or 2 or 3 decades before this became the norm, he drives a car that doesn't even need a key to be started.
I did not notice that.
Yep. And it's funny. It's like I was thinking. Like, I remember the first time I renting a car from an airport, and I was like, airport cars don't really need keys. And
there's another scene in here where a dude wakes up in a sweat, and he's got his shirt off, and then in the next moment he's wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants, and he's not even perspiring or shit, So there are those kind of things.
I mean, this is at the point in the franchise where they haven't really established that this movie is supposed to be. This movie and the first movie are clearly L.A. But that's not really. But the whole Midwest. But
Springwood is in Ohio.
Springwood's in Ohio, but that's not really established until the next movie. So it's interesting how very much this movie feels very.
It's kind of funny, actually. I got in a Freddy versus Jason argument with somebody, and they were like, "How does Jason walk all the way to California?" And it's like, Springfield's in Ohio, and he was like, "Oh,
Springwood.
Never mind." Did I say Springfield? God damn it!
You said Springfield.
Springwood, mother.
Don't. This one definitely feels. Yeah, this definitely feels a lot more California than Ohio. But what do we think of Jesse's relation? But any thoughts on Jesse's relationship with Lisa, or his friendship?
His friendship. He really wants his friend.
Yeah, I mean, they're really trying to make her the love interest, but it's not work. Kim Myers was actually pretty good in the role, but I'm not buying her as his girlfriend or would-be girlfriend.
I'm not entirely sure about her as a character. Is as far as her liking him, she definitely came off as liking him, you know.
Mhm.
But there's something about the chemistry that
It's
just
not there.
isn't entirely there. I don't know. I don't know if y'all feel
something
about
is
it.
off. Like, I think Jesse is actually supposed to be gay, like in canon. They just can't say it, like
Right.
in this time period. And so he's like trying to be interested in her, but not really. You know what I mean?
I was
Like, I
gonna
get that
say, like,
feeling.
it wouldn't. I don't know how. Again, it's a little. I don't even think it's necessarily like reading into it. I think it's pretty clearly there in the text that, you know, clearly their dynamic is such that they don't really work on any kind of physical level. I mean, I don't think he dislikes her per se, but it's obviously that they just don't, you
He
know,
doesn't see her
belong.
romantically.
Yeah, well, like they don't, you know, belong together in the same way that he clearly wants to be with his friend, and you know, then there's nothing, you know, wrong with like you connect with somebody on kind of an intellectual level, but there's just not that, you know, attraction factor there.
Yep. And no, definitely, yeah, exactly. And so okay, I'm sure. Sorry, I'm getting a little flustered here. Um, but yeah, I did. Yeah, it's anyway. So we get to the school. So Jesse gets to school. Jesse and Lisa get to school, and he gets into he's the new kid in town, and he gets into a fight with a guy named Grady during PE class, and the PE teacher, Coach Schneider, forces them to stay after school and do push-ups. And after that, they become friends, quote unquote.
Yeah, that.
I mean,
The coach is clearly gay too.
yeah,
Yeah.
as we will see later on. And he seems to really get his rocks off. He really seems to get his rocks off of
Punishing these kids, yeah.
punishing these kids. Yeah,
Yeah, but normally you don't like become buddy with like the head bully, you know, that quickly, you know.
totally, yeah.
Normally,
Or at least in most narrative features, he wouldn't.
Well, but then again,
narrative.
it's like they do, but again, they've got the chemistry with each other, and they have that kind of dynamic of, you know, he's like the softer, gentler one, and then he's the rougher one. And it's like, you know, you usually in a lot of those kind of that's a romantic trope. You
it's
know,
a bromantic trope.
Yeah, but in this case, I think it's much more romantic in the sense that, like, yeah, that's always the two people that they tend to have the chemistry. If they're too similar, then it's like, well, then they're not going to end up together. But in this case, it's like, well, you know, he's the scoundrel type, and then the other one is the gentler one.
Right. Yeah, actually, I should. I didn't pick up. Yeah, I don't know why I didn't pick up on that aspect of Jesse earlier. He's more the well, actually, yeah, I did. He's kind of the quiet, the more quiet one. The straight. Well, for lack of a better word, the straight man.
Sort of.
I guess that's no pun intended.
It's hard to talk about this type of thing with character actors, especially when it comes to the relationships of actors when they're supposed to have chemistry with each other, and there were strong feelings of like gay tendencies throughout at least the beginning parts of this film. I mean, you got the coach and his antics, and then you've got the whole thing where he after he makes out with the girl, he goes straight to him, and he's like, "Bro, you got to watch me all fucking night, even if you have to, you know." So it's definitely there. It's definitely somewhat underlined in there.
Yeah, well, they just it's all, but it's very. They have to keep it very, like, on the down low, or keep it keep it subtle.
Well, actually, that's much of a way of any kind of relationship between Jesse and Ron. They kind of hung out with each other, but after being punished by that coach guy, and of course Ron wanted to have some sort of protection, so Jesse wanted some sort of protection, so they went to Ron's room. I do fail to see where the homosexuality part came in.
Okay.
It kind of it's. I mean, well, actually, if I recall correctly, Jesse did when they first fought each other. Jesse did yank. I mean, granted, this was probably. I mean, he pantsed Ron right there on the field.
And his ass was showing like through most of that fight. So
there's definitely that gay. There's definitely like that gaze on.
Got a lot to learn about film.
Well, in any case, moving on to other characters.
But yeah, what do we think of? Actually, since we already asked, what do we think of Jesse and Ron?
Jesse's got a lot of personality to him. Like, Jesse's a likable main character.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I had no problem with Jesse. He just was the main character. You had to go all the way through the film.
Yeah, he was likable enough.
He's young and naive, just being a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and what about? Oh,
he's definitely got some awkwardness about him. Like, like even though he's on the football ball team, he's got that like nerdy awkwardness about him that I think is relatively likable for chicks. You know.
And what do we think about Ron? And what do we think about Grady, about Ron?
I guess he kind of shows up and kind of like becomes a friend with Jesse, but no, I think his only purpose there was to die.
Probably.
I mean, that's kind of the case. That's the case with a lot of characters in these kinds. With characters in a lot of these movies, we're supposed to feel for them and then connect with them before they become kibbles and bits.
Supposed to, but I didn't really connect with him all that much. He was, he was all right.
Well, yeah, he was all right. He came through, I guess, as a friend, but yeah, I think
They really didn't give him a lot to do.
No.
They both got sympathy points for the hell they had to put up with the coach, but
they didn't really give Ron much of a backstory neither. Right. I mean,
zero.
It was hard to relate with the characters as a whole, per se. But I do like the way the film came around as a whole. I do get what Brandon was saying earlier about the whole how Freddy Krueger as a character, he was different in here. I mean, he had to use someone else to come out of the real world, and none of them were really in the dream world all that long in this one. So I think that's one point that I think some people don't get in this movie.
Yeah, this one does break the Elm Street rules kind of a lot. So
Yeah,
that's an issue.
I mean, it's more about possession and reincarnation than dreams
Exactly.
and what they can do.
So what happens after the he's basically the new kid in town. What happens after
Mhm.
that?
Yes, yep, that's pretty much it. He's the new kid in town, and immediately comes good friends with the jock and the cute girl. But anyway, he comes home. Jesse comes home from school, and he's getting his bedroom set up and dancing to some music while he's with a pop gun. While he's
I do have
getting
to say, he had some pretty cool ass shades, like that he was like putting on, like as he was dancing. I mean, for some reason, I liked that. It's like that moment in Jerry Maguire where Tom Cruise was dancing. You know?
Yeah. Well, Jerry Maguire of risky business, right? Or risky business.
There we go.
I feel like this is very risky business. You know, this movie came out 2 years after Risky Business. I sort of get the impression that they were trying to riff on that. And he's also got that hot dog on a stick cap. But we cut. And by the way, that woman it's kind of silly, but I do have that song from that scene on my phone.
I think I have that in my iTunes library too. Actually, that's
same here. I have.
It's kind of.
It's part of my Halloween. It's part of my horror playlist.
When he's dancing in his room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. It's kind of funny. They were talking about that in the documentary, and during like the Q&A and stuff, like he just kind of mentioned it. It's like, straight guys always love that scene, and it's like, I do love that scene. Yes.
That's because we all do it when there's no one else around.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Well,
like I would always do weird stuff like that when nobody was around when I was younger.
And I guess it's a cool, awkward moment, like when suddenly his mother walks into the room and
the girl comes in too.
Yeah, right.
And the thing pops, and it's like, hey, oh.
Yeah, subtleties. Yeah, the subtleties. Yeah, that was not very subtle at all. Speaking of Jesse's mom, what do we think of Jesse's parents?
His father's a dick.
Yeah,
remarkably ignore their kids, and they're both producer parents, and they don't care. And this is amazing how little they care about their kids, other than saying, you need to clean your room, and you're just telling lies. Oh, you're a drug user. Oh, tell me, how long have you been a drug user, son? I mean, these parents
right.
And then on top of that, there's all this weird, strange shit going on around the house, and he has to do like find some kind of excuse to pin it on Jesse.
Yeah, like the toaster catching on fire.
Yeah. The bird's exploding. That was the weirdest part.
The toaster that wasn't even plugged in, He's like,
no, the bird's got to be the weirdest thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jesse did the bird thing too. I don't know how he did it, but he did it.
I kind of wonder if the dad was just some sort of alcohol. If the dad was just some sort of he kept blaming Jesse for a lot of things. I'm just wondering is he like some kind of alcoholic, or besides being negligent, is he?
Those parents very much reminded me of that 70s show Parents.
I don't know. Like Red was a hard ass, but he cared. Like I don't know if this guy cared.
And their parents they didn't want to talk to him. So yeah, they were just there to pretend that they had a family.
Okay. Interesting illustration. The interesting illustration of their lack of caring. One element of this movie that did not age well. just thinking of that one scene with the girl at the breakfast table eating those Fu Manchus. Isn't that a lovely little thing there? I'm like, what
I
kind
missed
of
that this time.
even in the 80s, what kind of parent would get that for their kids?
Well, and plus she had those.
Yeah.
Plus, she had those long Chinese
Right.
fingernails on her
Yeah.
hands,
Oh my
imitating
God.
imitating the Freddy Krueger hands. Like at the moment, is like
You're right.
okay, added element to the atmosphere.
Fu Manchu
Well,
material.
I want to say that that's one of the things that is a consistent through a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street series is that the adults are not that different thing from the adults in a lot of series
Right.
like Harry Potter or some of the others. Is the adults
Right.
are clueless
Mhm.
Well,
and they're always dead set. Not all of them, but a good portion of them are just dead set on helping.
They're
Freddy.
like they're like Keystone parents.
yeah, I think
Oh,
Brandon. I think
completely
Brandon.
oblivious. They've got all this stuff going on. It's like, this is normal stuff made by my kids. Oh my
Oh,
God.
this is just normal teenage
Yeah.
angst, you know?
Or as the father
This is
said here,
something
he's
every
obviously
teenager do.
he's obviously on drugs. But
Yeah,
I think Brandon was the one that brought up in conversation, and it's probably the best summation of this series is what was it? It was like these kids are scared shitless of going to sleep, and they're physically afraid of their dreams. So let's make them get more sleep.
they need just good RPM.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, get in the
It's like-
bed. Come on, let's go. Let's get in the bed.
Yeah.
Lock,
It makes so much sense.
lock the doors. Make sure that they don't come out.
Or put bars in the window.
Who's Freddy?
Oh, that was what the mother did in the first
In the
one.
first movie, yep.
She put bars on the windows and made sure that doors were locked inside and out. So
we see getting removed in this one.
That's one of the things that one of the few ties, and the first three really do tie into the first movie. And the tie here is that they move into the old house of the main character. They even reference the bars on the walls, and of course you've got the diary that they read later.
Yes, they find Nancy's diary while Jesse's getting settled in.
Correct.
How about that?
And that's one thing that adds to like the element of the plot building to this. Is the fact that okay, he's in a house that shit happened in, and it's obvious that this character Freddy Krueger is coming to get him at least to
Get
us.
him and his friends.
The thing is, in this particular film, I feel like they are very much making Freddy Krueger look like he's more or less like a king of hell or some shit like that. Especially with the melting of the house and the heat exposure and the burning up of the birds. This is all like elements of hell. That
the fire in the furnace.
Yeah. So to me, I feel like there's more of a devilish nature to him in this one.
He's evil for sure. I mean, this all he does is talk about. Look at the kids I got on my chest. He pulls over his shirt and says, look what I got the power from all the souls that I took.
Yeah, that was in the third movie.
And so the following night, Jesse has a nightmare where he's confronted by Freddy, who tells him to kill for him.
Yep, and the first one that I think gets offed is the coach.
Yes, actually, interestingly, it's like how I think it was like maybe maybe like 20 or 30 minutes into the movie before we actually see. I mean, apart from the prologue, we're about 20 or 30 minutes into the movie before we see Freddy.
Well, we see elements of Freddy because he's having a nightmare. The first thing he's having a nightmare of.
Isn't Freddy like on the bus?
Yeah,
Yeah, then we go a very long stretch without seeing him.
And that's one thing that I noticed about this movie. It started on a bus and it ended on a bus. So, that's one thing I remembered, and it's like, the only other two movies that I remembered were that had something to do with the bus was the movie Simon Birch and Trick or Treat.
Oh God, Simon Birch. That was a horror movie in of itself. Anyway, so Jesse, continues to have more intense dreams about Freddy, and eventually he finds himself at a gay bar.
Oh,
where he encounters Coach Schneider in an S&M outfit, wearing a leather outfit, and makes him run laps at the school as punishment. I mean, I don't know. In that period, I don't know. In that time period, I think if I were Coach Schneider and one of my students saw me hanging out in an S&M club, I would probably be like, I wouldn't even punish him. I would probably be like telling Jesse, "You did not see me. You never saw me here," or something like that. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because you would think that you would think that he would like have something to say about like his reputation,
Yeah.
But
like I'd probably be trying to. I would try to be. I wouldn't. I don't think I'd punish. If I were a teacher and a student caught me in a situation like that, punishment is probably the last thing that I'd probably be able to enforce on that. Like they basically got the upper hand there. But then again, I don't know. He's kind of in a daze and being possessed by Freddy. So.
Well, and after the S&M moment in the shower room, killing the coach off, then of course.
Actually, we forgot to mention this is probably for me one of the best moments of the franchise. One of the funniest, probably one of the funniest moments in the series. While Jesse's running laps, or he makes Jesse's run laps and then hit the showers, and Freddy forces a cabinet with all the sports equipment open. And flings balls at Coach Schneider, hitting him, and then Freddy's spirit rips Schneider's clothes off and claws him to death. Which then we find out it was Jesse who did it. Jesse, who was possessed by Freddy, who did it. But what do we think of that moment? But overall, what do we think of that moment?
The towel butt slapping was kind of an integral part of that scene that I feel like we've glossed over.
Yeah, how did I forget that? He was repeatedly getting smacked in the butt with a towel.
Yeah, it was comical at the time, but it can be somewhat overrated.
I mean, it wasn't really that funny. It was kind of like, it felt like gratuitous to me.
Yeah, it was a very in your face, definitely a very in your face moment.
Yeah,
and then the next moment we get is him standing over his sister.
Or before that, the cops catch him catch Jesse walking around naked, walking around in the middle of the night naked, and take him home.
And then, of course, there's a party that I think goes on at somebody's place.
Oh yeah, it was a pool party at Lisa's place.
And from what I understand, them two somewhat get it on. Of course.
Well, one thing I love about that party scene is how quickly they're just like they're having this calm party, and as soon as the parents turn off the lights, like, oh, they turned off the lights. Now let's goes like they're not going to hear them at that point.
Yeah, they're playing like this board. They're playing like this. But during the party, they're just playing like music. And then as soon as the lights go out, they play the party. They play like full on party music and break out the balloons
and all kinds of activities. You would think the parents would say, "Hey, what's going on outside?" But nope, they stayed in bed. So we don't care.
I think they said something to the effect that, what do you think is going on down there? There, he's like, they're just being kids.
They're just kids. Sure, they're having sex on the steps. Don't worry. They're just kids.
And they break out like with beer and everything. It's like,
It's something like materialized alcohol for everybody to drink. Yeah.
It's just like a wild
I just want to
background
backtrack
party.
before we go to before the party. Lisa takes Jesse to the boiler room, where Freddy took his victims when he was alive.
That's right. She does take him there because she did some investigating, and this is where he went, and she took him there to try to see if he saw anything happen, or if he reacted to anything. And I don't think he had that much of a reaction.
I mean, there really wasn't much going on. That scene really didn't really have much going for it.
If anything, that was just the jump scare of the rat.
Yeah, I think they could have easily left that whole moment out of the movie, and would have been fine. I feel like that maybe I don't know if they just put that in there just to they were trying to say something, just trying to pad time.
Yeah. But the film needed to be an hour and a half, so they had to add something in there.
Yeah.
But in any case, them two start getting it on. I guess, and I guess after his tongue pretty much comes out of his head.
Freddy's tongue.
Well, yeah. But in any case, he runs straight to his buddy's place and says, "I want you to watch me all night. I don't care." So and I guess he does, and I guess they had that moment where his parents hear him screaming, and they're pounding on the door, and
Freddy's being reborn.
Yeah, because Freddy's like becoming more material. He's trying to come through the body, and took over Jesse's body like he's been doing throughout the film.
Freddy fully manifests in the real world, which he's never done that willingly. Yeah. I think obviously not before, but I don't think ever since.
Which Friday the 13th movie was it where Jason transferred himself like
Jason
Shocker?
Goes to Hell. That was Jason Goes to Hell.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it kind of reminded me like this transferring from body to human form. They were doing a lot of that. They were doing a lot of that with Shocker and some other films.
But every other time Freddy's come into the real world, he was pulled out by the hero.
Well, there is a theory behind it that I've heard from others in horror communities that the entire movie itself is a dream.
It's a dream.
That the movie itself never really took place in reality, which also you can then look at some of the inconsistencies and see
that would actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, it does. Because at the end, you have the bus scene that kind of goes on. You never have a real end to the film because it kind of I figured it was like an unending dream.
Yeah, it did kind of have that feeling, So I could definitely see that theory going through. But in any case, where are we now?
We're transitioning to the body that going to the Ron's house. And Freddy's let loose, and he's starting to kill and maim and
Freddy just shows up at that party and just goes nuts.
boiling
So
boiling kids and burning others to the fence.
It's slicing them up.
we get my favorite line. I just want to help. Help yourself, fucker. Wow.
You're all my children now. And actually, what do we think of this whole like pool party massacre?
It's pretty great. It's
pretty well
the
done,
highlight.
pretty well shot.
The highlight of the movie, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but Lisa tries to fight Freddy, and he ends up massacring this pool party. And Lisa's father tries to come out and stop it, but Freddy escapes in a ball of flame.
He just wows out. Yeah.
And so Lisa pursues Freddy to the boiler room, where she's got to control her fear before she can take on Freddy. And so Lisa confronts Freddy with Jesse inside of him. She tries to bring Jesse out of Freddy.
And the thing of it is they bring the romance back into it at this moment because it's the 3 words "I love you," which is the secret password.
I felt like this part was so lame and cheesy.
It was not earned. They had no each other. They had chemistry. I rejected the girl. I mean, someone she says, "I love you," and somebody whoosh bang, everything's good to go. There was a cheap way of trying to get the girl involved with the show.
It felt almost Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah. A magic wand, the poof.
And all of a sudden, Jesse is back to normal. All of a sudden, Jesse is back to normal.
All of a sudden, instant true love will end the curse.
Overcome the evil, and love triumphs over evil. And da.
Yeah, it's almost like a fairy tale ending, except you got that fucked up fairy tale ending.
But they made you look, because then we go back. The next day or sometime later. Jesse, Lisa, and Lisa's friend. Instead of taking Jesse's car, they take the school bus. And deja vu, Freddy's driving the bus and drives them off a cliff again.
and the movie.
Yep, that's it.
Yep.
So I guess since we pretty much went through the whole plot and the characters, I just touch upon other areas. Special effects. What did we think of the special effects?
I think they had pretty good effects.
I think it's low budget stuff, but then again, it's a low budget movie, and I think they worked with the budget they had. It's nothing really outstandingly stupid about it. They had bodies, you had blood when they needed it. So I think
Freddy's exposed brain.
Yeah,
Freddy's brain was good. When Freddy's coming out of Jesse, you can tell it's a pretty fake. You can tell it's a pretty fake looking head for a few frames, and it's like, oh, come on, man.
Seeing Freddy's eyeball through Jesse's throat was pretty cool, though.
That was a good shot, yeah.
And I kind of like, and this is also the first time that we see Freddy with the organic claw as opposed to the glove, which I thought was pretty neat.
I don't like the organic one where it's just growing out of his hand. It doesn't look as visually interesting to me. So this is my least favorite technically glove out of the series.
I feel like what they established here was greatly improved upon in New Nightmare, where there's more bone and
where it's got bones and shit. Yeah. It looks so much better in New Nightmare. No kidding.
I mean, for me, New Nightmare overall has the best looking Freddy of the franchise.
At least in the face.
I would say the face, organic claw, and the
outfit, I guess. I think I like the trench coat the most, as an addition. His face looks a little Terminator-y to me in that one, so I kind of don't like it as much. I prefer classic Freddy. If they could just give him if they could just give classic Freddy the trench coat,
which you see in some promotional materials, like the old DVD box set.
Yeah, I like that. I wish Dead by Daylight was allowed to give Freddy like cosmetics. They could give him the trench coat. They could give him all these looks, but they just can't do it.
Yeah.
It's the stupid license. Like, they only got approved to remake Freddy and are literally not allowed to do anything fun.
Huh. Interesting. And what about music? What do we think about the music? I mean, I think we're pretty much all in agreement that Fonda Ray's All Night Long song was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a classic score too. I mean, it's got a few standout moments in it.
Yeah, it's kind of spooky, but it's kind of, I feel like it's missing the that Nightmare on Elm Street, that do do do.
That's the thing is, the scores and these kind of mirror the Friday the 13th movies as they go on, where they had more of the rock and roll type scores as they went.
Yeah.
Which is good and bad in many ways.
Definitely.
Yeah, although they go back to the classic Nightmare theme in the next movie, and we will hear that for the rest of them. And I guess that's. I guess we'll go around and do favorite scenes, moments, anything else. I'll go around. As we did with the first impressions, Dave, for favorites.
I would have to say that my favorite scene would probably be the whole melting scene where the records were melting and the temperature it was going up, and they were saying it's so hot in here, and then the birds exploded. That was so fucking weird. You know.
Roger, favorites.
Oh, that's the bus to hell.
Yep, that was the first bus or the second bus.
No, I like both buses, but if the first bus was even more interesting, because you didn't know what the heck was going on.
And Jake, favorites.
I'm not really sure anything really stood out as a favorite in this one. I was impressed by the melting effects in that one scene, and so I'll go with that, I guess.
Okay. And Dustin, favorites.
Well, the Jesse dance scene is fun. But my favorite is still like the party massacre, and of course that line, "Help yourself, fucker." Freddy's just like, "How dare you?"
Dane, favorites.
Probably the whipping in the bathroom for whatever reason. That always stuck out to me.
Oh my!
It's so kind of over. It's so, again, I don't know if they really got how gay that really was, or rather sadomasochistic that really was. But watching it, I was like kind of laughing at how like it's so painfully obvious to us now, but that must have just skated right by a lot of people back then.
Yeah, actually, when I first saw that, the first time I saw that scene, I just felt like, hell yeah, this asshole coach got what he deserved. Now I look at it and it's just like, very funny in a dark and homoerotic kind of way.
Yeah, in a sadomasochistic kind of way.
That is something I kind of left out from my first impression, because I didn't really pick up on the gay undertones thing.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on it until I was older.
Until like people kind of pointed it out, and then it was like very obvious. But the first time I saw it, I was still like, wow, there are a lot of naked men in this movie.
Which again, it's just kind of funny because if your gaydar is not all that well developed, or if you don't have a lot of gay friends or whatever, then it's like, well, maybe it's not as obvious to you. But then it's like if you're used to kind of seeing the signs, then you watch it and you're like, oh yeah, okay.
Oh, I thought that was something that regular people do. I thought that's what mommy and daddy did in the bedroom at night. I mean, God, what's going on?
There's a joke with historians. There's a joke about how historians always say that people were good friends. It's like two men buried together. Their skeletons are holding hands. They were good friends.
Well, better
Yeah.
than Sailor Moon and making them cousins.
Yeah. Well, there are all kinds of interesting innuendos that you see throughout history, and different ways that those kinds of things can be communicated in literature and in art, and in that there are a lot of stories about like close female friends or close male friends, that clearly were a lot closer than friends, but society didn't want them to admit it. But it was such that in this film, that scene stuck out to me just because it was so, I don't know, it made me laugh with how overt it was by modern standards, but also how much it would have skated by
Yeah.
the standards of the time.
Yeah, you don't necessarily expect a Marquis de Sade moment.
And I'm finding myself increasingly fascinated by either literal sadomasochism in stuff like Sallow, or like metaphorical, like in Hellraiser. Find that all very interesting.
All right.
All right.
Anything else, Dan? Anything else? Thank you for that. Anything else? I just don't want
Well, I didn't get my favorite in.
to. Okay, yes,
go ahead.
Brandon, please, favorites.
It's not that different from Rogers. I agree. The bus scene, to me, was one of the best things in the movie, and it just started it off. So it all went downhill from there. But I really did. I liked the bus scene, both at the beginning and the end. But of course, if it had to be one or the other, it would be the beginning one, because it really does build the suspense, and it gets me interested, at least for the time being, in the film, which is good.
Okay.
Thank you. And for me, I would probably say, for me, I would just say there's like a lot of the special effects in this one, from Freddy being reborn through Jesse to the pool party massacre. I thought that whole scene was very well done, especially given it was given its limited budget.
I was just thinking, the guy who had the baby in the stomach in Total Recall?
Yes.
The baby man. Well, he played the coach, I thought here in this movie.
That was him.
He to me, when I saw Freddy come out of him, it kind of reminded me of like, this is what dude would like in his full form out of dude's stomach, and I was like, damn.
He also had roles in Twins, Dick Tracy, and Starship Troopers.
We need to, we haven't done Starship Troopers or Twins yet. We need to hit those too.
Eventually.
Alrighty. I don't think we'll do outros yet. We'll wait until next film. But thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen, and join us on our next
Episode
discussion
for Nightmare on Elm Street 3. It's gonna rock.
Yeah.
The Dream Warriors.
All right.
Yeah.